Welcome to Purdue Crop Chat, a regular podcast from Hoosier Ag Today and the Purdue University Extension Service, featuring Purdue Extension soybean specialist Dr. Shaun Casteel and Extension corn specialist Dr. Dan Quinn. Now your host for Purdue Crop Chat, Hoosier Ag Today's Eric Pfeiffer.
From the Indiana Corn and Soybean Innovation Center, Eric Pfeiffer here from Hoosier Ag Today. It's another Purdue Crop Chat podcast. Thanks for joining us, whether you're listening via audio or watching us via video. And if you're watching via video, sorry you have to watch us. But, you know, it is what it is. I got a face for radio here, a couple of faces for crop science over there, the stars of the show.
That's even worse than face for radio.
That's Dan Corn Quinn. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Eric.
And Soybean Shaun Casteel is here. Hello, Shaun.
Howdy, Eric.
We did try to, dress up the podcast a little bit. We brought in a special guest. Shaun, I'll let you introduce her here. Go ahead.
All right. Well, we're fortunate enough, Dan especially, and we have taken the soil fertility information for too long, and we finally have Megan joining us today. Megan joined, about a month ago?
Yep.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. My name's Megan Bourns. I've been at Purdue for pretty much a month bang on now. Nice. So I'm originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba, up in Canada, born and raised. Was a city kid, but had a little country on the side growing up. So both my parents come from farming backgrounds. So agriculture was always kind of there, but was never really something I thought I'd end up working in. But here we are, and I wouldn't change a thing. I love it. Did my bachelor's in agronomy, master's in soil science, which is where I started to really get interested in soil fertility. Worked on potassium, spent a couple years as an agronomist working for the Manitoba pulse and soybean growers, running their field scale on-farm research program. Eventually made my way south to Kansas, where I did my PhD in phosphorus fertility for corn soybean systems, did a little tiny postdoc at the University of Arkansas, and now I'm here. I'm very glad to be here.
Megan, we're super excited to have you here again. Your background and just not just to relieve our workload, but we're excited. When Megan interviewed, and you start first giving your seminar, I was like, okay, let's sign her up. Seriously, you could tell right away she had just the extension gene and just has a great background and application. So we're excited to have
I told
her.
him to hire her after even the Zoom interview. But
yeah, you were on the search committee, so I hadn't seen her till the interview day. And then I was like, nope, she's good. Let's go.
Well, appreciate it.
Well, we are glad to have you here. A couple of things we need to address right away. You are from Canada.
I am.
Hey.
Is that basically the same as where Dan is from?
We're going to have fighting words here. You keep saying that. No. And I think Dan would agree. Michigan is not Canada, despite what people say.
It's not the same thing?
Not the same thing.
Okay.
No. We would always go to Canada, drinking age was 19, and, there's some
what
good things about Canada.
What are you trying to teach your students here?
That's part of being the part of stuff was always a little cheaper. We'd go across the border. So, yeah, but not the same.
Not the same.
Maybe
okay.
close, but not the same.
All right. So what do you miss most from Canada that we just don't have here in the U.S.? What is there something that you're just dying to have? Can't wait to get back home to get it?
I don't want to start any fights, and this is going to sound so Canadian, but your maple syrup is garbage.
Oh,
in this country.
Man.
Wow.
The gloves are off. She's 2 minutes into it, and it's it's garbage.
This is Megan's email. And,
we have plenty. There's plenty in Indiana that I get maple syrup as a gift after giving a talk. I don't think you're getting that gift anymore.
Probably not, but it's just not the same.
We also we have to indoctrinate you with a nickname. Is it maple syrup, Megan? Is that what we go with?
What about ketchup chips? That's always one of my go-tos.
Ketchup chips are a solid snack.
Yeah,
I've never heard of ketchup chips.
Oh,
is this
That's
a
a big
thing?
It's a thing, yeah.
Thing in Canada. Tim Hortons too.
You dip chips
No.
in ketchup, or there are ketchup flavored chips.
Ketchup
ketchup
chips.
flavored.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just bypassing the fries and the ketchup, and it's all together.
They combine it.
There's another one. Is it all dressed?
All dressed, yeah.
All dressed.
Those are starting to show up
Yes.
here.
Those are good.
Every
No,
now
I
and
like those.
Explain. You got to explain it to the American guy here. I'm USA all the way. What
I don't know.
is this?
It's just good seasoning. I don't know what seasoning
Yeah,
it is.
it's kind of a concoction of it's probably a ketchup chip mixed with a salt and vinegar chip.
and maybe
And a
some maple
barbecue
syrup.
chip or
Maybe
something.
I don't know.
Maybe. The good stuff.
Like good stuff.
Okay.
Grade A, not USDA, but Canadian A.
Yes.
Canadian. Is that EH or just A?
We'll let you Google that one.
Canadian A. Well, Megan, thank you for joining us. We will talk about soil fertility. That is why we didn't just bring you here to, talk about Canada. That was
We can bash it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
she already took the gloves off.
She did take the gloves off. She's already got the swing of this podcast, apparently. Let's take a step back here with Dan and Shaun and just talk about some of the things that we're seeing currently. Shaun, I'll start with you. We go back to USDA's last outlook. We discussed it on the last podcast.
That's right.
They're predicting record yields. Again, that's as of August 1 when they put those out, right?
Yep.
We're waiting to hear more from them for this month, maybe a little bit more science behind it in the September report.
Well, there's still
coming up.
science behind it. It's just whenever
A
they
little
make
bit more.
Yeah, more. Right. Again, you're the one that gives us perspective, right, Eric? The truth here. But you think about when they come out with those August reports. I mean, it's based more or less on what's coverage, maybe some stand counts over on your side, but there's no pod counts on the soybean side, right? And so those numbers are just, okay, what was planting date, what's kind of NDVIs, if you will, and 62 bushels at the forecast that they put. I mean, that's record, and I just don't see it. And I was traveling around the state last few weeks. I think you left us with last time, what will it take to reach that?
Yeah.
And we said the perfect conditions. That'd be the nice timely rains, the sunshine, all those things. We haven't gotten those in the last few weeks.
It's been dry.
It has been dry. And Dan and I were just talking. Mego's down at the Southeast Field Day as well. And down in that area, those beans and corn were planted a little bit later. Root systems are compromised. And if you look at a drought map, they're not, quote, dry on the drought map, but the fields are telling you otherwise. And I drove up in the northern part of the state, northeast, and doing some other field days out of state last week, and beans are turning to flipping over. So, I think this crop is quickly coming. Water rules the day, and the lack of it, we're hitting senescence pretty quick.
And, again, I guess let's take a step back. Those numbers, again, from USDA as of August 1, and just to reiterate, we didn't really see that on August 1 either, right?
No.
That's just not what we were seeing for corn or soybeans.
Yep.
After what we've experienced here, this very dry August, I mean, how far off do you think we are? I'll get your number later. Don't you worry.
Well,
but how far off are we? Yeah.
I mean, we're still, as far as good to excellent, just looking those up, we're still around low 60s, like 61%. So that's fair. It's not, I mean, our highest yield, our record-breaking years, we're around the 65 to 70 as we tail out July, August, and September. And we just haven't been there. We've been in the upper 50s, low 60s, good to excellent most of the season, both crops. And I just don't see us advancing in any way to get to that level. Where are we at now? I mean, I put the number 58.5 was my guess last time, and I'd say we might be struggling to get that at the state level.
Dan, let's talk corn because it's been a pretty similar situation here. What say you about where we are with corn right now?
Yeah, similar story on the corn front. You look at the yield estimates, and to Shaun's point, a lot of it is based off of models, NDVI imagery. It's what they have, right? It's really hard, and people love to argue and say the USDA is full of what. But it's what they have. It's the data they have. It's really hard to get an accurate yield estimate of corn unless you're actually pulling ears. And then also the other aspect with a lot of these yield estimates, even now before maturity, is the grain fill aspect. Grain fill has such a big influence on final yields, and you really don't know that until the combine rolls through and stuff's going over the scales. So that's why it's really hard to get a good accurate judge of the yield estimates. I do think you look at, I think the Pro Farmer Tour went through and a little bit lower on that front from Indiana perspective. I do think the number will come down, and all indications for the state of Indiana is that it will come down over the next couple months, especially as stuff starts to roll through. I echo that. Yeah, there's a lot of areas that I think are more dry than what we give them credit for because of the compromised root systems. We had a lot of corn go in that was slammed in early June, that was in tough conditions, that a lot of those areas that farmers just couldn't get a break, and they had to get it in. We had some areas, you look at Northwest Indiana that had really long stretches of dry conditions in some of those areas. So I do think they're being impacted. You can see the crop really starting to turn. And I had reports today of farms that are just south of Lafayette that their corn was 17% moisture, which is, it was planted early April, but that was pretty eye-opening. We have stuff around here that's already, mature and 30%, and we're still at the beginning of September. So I do think stuff has progressed, and it's when it's dry. The good thing is the temps are a little bit cooler now, but still, when it's dry, it impacts grain fill. The disease side too. Not so much tar spot wasn't the story this year. It was southern rust. Southern rust was nasty, and it was everywhere. It was all the way up to mid-Michigan. I know Iowa took it on the chin, and in Illinois, southern rust was everywhere. That's a function of the temperatures we've had and the weather we've had. I've even from some of our own trials, we've had submitted disease, to our diagnostic labs, and a lot of them came back with not one but like 4 or 5 diseases. So I do think you look at the grain fill aspect of the dry conditions, the foliar diseases that we have. I do think that's impacting some of the grain fill and impacting some of the yield.
Now, this may be a question for Darcy, and we didn't bring her on today, but is what we experienced this season, what we're experiencing this season, is it going to make people rethink some of their disease prevention protocols going forward? Folks in northern Indiana and mid-Michigan, they haven't had to worry about southern rust before. Now, that's probably part of their disease plan anyway. They just, it comes that way. Think of it as an added bonus. But are they having to rethink?
I don't think they want that added bonus.
But are they rethinking how they handle this for next year and years going forward?
Well, I think they have to, but it's really tricky with a disease like southern rust because it really gets reset every year. It's really hard to predict. Yep. Tar spot is something that, once you have it, and if the conditions are right, we're probably going to see it. And some of the other diseases similar. Southern rust, one year you could have it, and next year we could never see it. A lot of it is based off of storm systems, the movement of the spores out of the south, and also temperatures on that aspect. Disease like tar spot doesn't like high temps, and I think that's been a big reason why we haven't had much. It's been around it, but haven't had much. Disease like southern rust comes out of the south. It's more tropical disease. The higher temps, it's going to thrive more. That's what makes southern rust really tricky, is it's so hard to predict. But the good thing, I say good thing, but one thing we can do with southern rust is actually watch it move up. They do a good job of the pathologists. You start tracking it. Okay, Mississippi has it. Okay, Tennessee has it. Kentucky has it. Okay, now we're getting, southern Indiana. So you get a pretty good understanding of, I would say, in terms of southern rust and how it's moving. But southern rust is a very aggressive disease. It can cause significant yield damage in a lot of areas, and it's something that can still impact corn all the way into late grain fill periods. So, it's something that, was really shocking to see it move all the way up to, mid-Michigan and in some of these areas. So it's something that is going to be on these farmers' minds as they keep moving forward.
As we chat here on the Purdue Crop Chat, let's bring Megan Bourns back into the conversation. We're going to come up with this nickname.
He's been doing this for a few years with Darcy, and he still hasn't settled.
If
you don't like what he... Now, here's the thing, Megan. If you don't like something, don't tell him, because he's going to keep it.
It'll stick.
It will stick.
Got it.
There's a certain picture that I said I didn't like, and he continues to use over and over.
It's the best picture I have of you.
It's just the subject matter, I guess. So.
Now, if you recall, when we started the Purdue Crop Chat, it's been 5 years we were talking about earlier, Shaun. We started you and I were the only remaining ones from the start.
Right.
But when we brought Dan on, he felt like he was, right back going through his interview and everything
dissertation
else.
defense.
Yeah, your dissertation. I mean, you had it handed to you by Bob Nielsen and by Shaun.
Yeah, they probably had me come up to the board. I had to diagram, the plant.
You could see the beads of sweat. Just glad there wasn't a video then.
Yeah, that was my first week up here.
Literally, it was your like the first few days.
Thrown to the fire. That's part of it.
Might as well. Revenge time, Dan. Go ahead.
Oh, good.
Megan is here. Go ahead. Run her through the ringer.
All right, let's have her go up to the board, and we'll do the phosphorus cycle. And
I want to see the clay mineralogy in this.
Yeah,
structure.
can you explain 2-to-1 clays?
No, we won't go there. I'll go and start, so he won't want to.
No.
So as we think about this season, I already kind of posed this one to you a little bit. As we think about this fall coming up, we got market prices that are below break evens, right? And so
well below.
Nice. And so what's just some of your general thoughts as we go into this fall sampling time and application cost, and whether can we get by with what the soil already has on a P and K level as an example? And just give us your 2 cents on that.
Yeah, it'll be a tough year to make some of those decisions, that's for sure. I think kind of going through, the list related to soil fertility and crop nutrition, the first thing I'm probably going to cut out is my salesman's favorite specialty product that may or may not be helpful, right? Sure. We want to try and stick to what's going to reliably give us yield increases or return on investment. Do those things work? Sure. Some of the time, probably. Do we know what that looks like every year? Probably not, sure. Right? Getting into a little more specifics, just like you brought up, P and K is definitely the place that we're going to look. If you're not routinely soil testing, this is probably a good year to think about starting that in the near future, because using those soil test values to make an informed decision about where to cut back is really helpful and valuable.
Sure.
So hopefully we have some soil test values to go off of. And yeah, I would say, if you're sitting pretty good above the critical levels for P and for K, that's where I would look to cut first.
Sure.
In terms of how much you can cut back, it kind of depends on, what your cash flow is looking like and what your comfort level is with cutting back. But if you're sitting well above those critical levels, could you forego your regular application completely? Yeah, you probably could and be okay with it.
Sure.
Just keeping in mind what comes on, the other side of this year as well, right? Because you're going to draw down your soil test levels a little bit. But P and K is for sure the first place that I would look. And if you're sitting good with your soil test levels, it's a much easier decision than if you're hovering around or below those critical levels.
I think one thing for us to understand is, how do we come up with those critical levels, right? This is where the defense questions come in, right? But we've got these set. We've got Tri-State, other places, and you've worked with other places, have their own set values. But those are based on probabilities, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is the probability of seeing a response or not seeing a response. And there could be some conditions where you could be at critical levels, and I'm not saying that this is hey, let's roll the dice, but I'm like, there's years that you could be at critical levels and still be fine for the next year.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But certainly if you're above, that's where there's a lot of grace, essentially, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and a hard thing is that there's not really, a one-size-fits-all answer.
Yep.
In, like you said, the critical value is not, a gospel truth, so
you don't just drop off the cliff, right?
No,
it's just a little slide. Right?
Yeah, and depending on your soil type and your system, like, you might not even see that much of a decrease after 1 year of not applying phosphorus fertilizer, for example.
Sure.
There's a general rule of thumb, and again, this isn't, going to fit every system or every soil, every situation. It's kind of a general average. But you can think about, generally speaking, looking at if you're removing every 18 pounds of phosphorus, P2O5 that you remove, is about a part per million in soil test P. So you can kind of calculate that out. Is that going to be the case every time? Absolutely not. But it's a rough back of the envelope value to kind of help guide what you might see in a fertility drop if you're kind of cutting back on those fertilizer inputs. But yeah, even the critical levels, it's our best estimate of where those cutoff values should be, and it's all based on averages and probabilities and statistics, and it's not going to be the case in every situation. So
Dan, I think back to some of the fields that we run, and we look at the soil test levels, and there's farms that we work with, and like, how is it there? And I know what you applied last year, and there's still, and that's why we have Megan here to answer these questions, because there's several farms that we run that they apply what we tell them to or what their recommendations are, and yet those soil test levels just can't get up to critical, even though we've been trying for years. So I think it's the understanding. And would you agree with that, some of these fields that we run?
Yeah, I remember when I started Southeast Indiana, the those clay soils that we deal with down there. You know, I got the soil test reports, and I was like, what the heck are you guys doing down there? And they're like, we apply every year, we swear. So, there's some challenging soils out there, especially with like potassium, particularly. But yeah, it's being mindful of both those nutrients. You know, there's a lot of areas I would echo on the phosphorus side that are very high in phosphorus that you probably don't need to apply for the next 30 years and probably get away with it. But, you know, that's a reason why these soil tests were kind of built the way they were is another avenue to give you some of these grace periods
for sure.
as well. So, that's a great point. I wanted to ask Megan because I get asked this all the time, and I know it's a great debate topic about soil sampling. Just in your experience, and I know you can go both ways, zone or grid sampling. That's always, I get that question a lot. There's a lot of people. I'm just curious in your experience and where you tend to lean.
That's a good question, and very debatable.
Very debatable.
You took the gloves off.
I did.
Just so you know.
I started
just
this.
so you know.
Is the answer going to be it depends? Does she have that down already?
I think that transcends all nations. Really.
She was angling for that already.
That was part of her new faculty training.
Yeah, yes. It depends on. So I think it depends on how you're making your management decisions. I really think that should be a driver in how you are doing your soil sampling and thinking about managing your fertility. I think you get obviously more information at a finer scale if you grid sample. How useful is that information if you're not variable rating every acre? Maybe not that useful, right? Especially if you're looking at soil sampling this year, if cash flow's tight and you want to save a little, maybe it's not the year to grid sample.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with zone sampling as long as you don't need that finer scale of information to make your management decisions in the coming years. That's kind of my it depends on answer.
Is it? Are you just happy if people are soil sampling at all?
Yes, please soil sample.
I mean,
it's great.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know that it's a regular part of every farmer's operation, and
we hope it is. But
it should be.
Certainly, let's hit the foundational things. I think
Yeah.
that's what Megan's really doing. It's like hit the foundational things. So the money that you invest in soil sampling can save you so much more that you know that
Yes.
you are adequate or well above in phosphorus or potassium, right? Or, I mean, one we haven't brought up yet is pH, right? I mean, that's one that I personally do not want to skimp on. If we're below or close to critical levels, that affects so much of nutrient availability. I think about the soybean side and Brady rhizobium activity. So that's one that I was like, let's make sure we really nail that one down.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And that's something, if it's time for a lime application, that's not something I would be looking at, cutting out or skipping this year if you can fit it in. For sure, I agree.
I would echo that you're not going to know what to cut back unless you know what's there.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where you can see that value of routine soil sampling. If you're just shooting at it blind, you're not going to know where to add or where to pull it back at in certain areas of the field.
I'd like to just kind of bring a little bit of history into this too, as far as if we've got those that are taking soil samples. I know we've got a good group that have consultants as well as themselves, but think back when they did take the last soil sample and what the condition was like. And the reason I bring this up, Megan, last year in particular is an example. You talk about dry down. Holy cow. I mean, we had 7 weeks of no rain, and we were cutting beans at 9-10%, and that level of dryness, what that does for soil sampling, the analysis that comes out of it, there's some nuance that comes with, okay, if you got super dry samples, what does that mean for potassium levels, as an example? And so I always want to caution people, it's like soil tests are great. But remember, if you had a year that was a really odd year, and if you took it in the fall that was dry versus, I think back to another year, again, you kind of get the history of this, what's the trend? 19, if I recall, super wet fall, and a lot of people didn't get sampled until the spring. And so that can have a difference on how you play this out too.
Yeah,
right?
and I think this is a good argument in favor of routine soil sampling, right?
Yes.
If you're taking just kind of one snapshot, you maybe don't get the best picture of what's going on, certainly not what's going on over time and how different, sampling conditions can affect it. But yeah, that's a great point for sure.
Let's take a time out here on the Purdue Crop Chat. And when we come back, we will continue grilling Megan. That's what today's podcast is all about. We're talking soil
That'll
fertility.
be the title, Grilling Megan.
Yes. Grilling Megan Bourns.
I love that nickname.
I don't know.
Oh, I think she's trying to reverse psychology. Reverse psychology, Eric.
And when we spell boron, is it BORE-ON? Is it? Oh, no. See, now I've got ideas. Let's take a time out. We'll come back. We'll talk more with Megan and the guys after this on the Purdue Crop Chat from Hoosier Ag Today.
There is strength in numbers. That's why the Indiana Soybean Alliance membership and policy and Indiana Corn Growers Association need you. These organizations represent Indiana soybean and corn farmers on critical and regulatory issues affecting their industry. Along with support from the national organizations, National Corn Growers Association and American Soybean Association, the Indiana members help determine public policy positions on critical issues, including farm bills, trade policy, and ethanol and biodiesel legislation. Become a member of Indiana Soybean Alliance membership, Indiana Corn Growers Association, or both. Visit incornandsoy.org to select a membership. That's incornandsoy.org.
At Indiana Farm Bureau, we serve tree farmers, goat farmers, and in fact, all farmers. With over 250,000 members, Indiana Farm Bureau represents a broad range of farmers and puts power in your collective voice. You also get advice from our subject matter experts, more affordable health plan options, and support for youth programs statewide. So whether you grow soybeans or strawberries, membership means you'll be heard. Become a member today at infb.org.
We're back on the Purdue Crop Chat. Eric Pfeiffer here at the Indiana Corn and Soybean Innovation Center in West Lafayette. Dan Corn Quinn, Soybean Shaun Casteel, and Megan Maple Syrup Bourns.
You're going to Chat GPT to get this.
Well, you know, there was one nickname that got shot down pre-show as Shaun was talking about some things, you know, soil fertility. I mean, manure is a big part of this, right?
Hey, I have heard from so many people that manure research is needed, so
it is,
I might pigeonhole myself into that nickname here.
So Megan Manure Bourns. I mean, I don't know. That might be just as bad as Darcy's nickname.
I'm not going to comment. I tried to shield her on that one.
Either way, let's keep chatting about soil. We've talked about soil testing. You've talked about, you know, grid versus zone. Besides P&K, what other types of things are you looking for in that soil sample that farmers really need to be looking out for? And, you know, if it's close, maybe we let it go this year. What other types of things are you looking for in there?
Yeah, that's a good point. So we had kind of brought up the idea of, you know, lime and monitoring your pH earlier. And that's something, like I said, because it has such an effect on nutrient availability and your crop growth, I'd be really careful with looking at, you know, skipping that lime application if it's time, depending again on, you know, if you can fit it in or not. I understand it's a tight year. Other than that, you know, as far as like nitrogen, sulfur, and things like that go, sulfur in Indiana is interesting, and I'm excited to see more data because in my experience in other places and talking to other people, sulfur responses are hard to come by, but that doesn't necessarily seem like it's the case here. Now, is it a year to go out and apply sulfur? I might defer that to the people who've done sulfur research recently.
Who's that?
I don't know who that is.
I've never heard of them.
But it's probably, again, something that, you know, if you're on the fence and need to cut corners, I'd say it's probably something that can slip by this year. Nitrogen's where I'd, again, be very careful. Excuse me. You know, looking at your economic optimums in years of tight prices, your nitrogen rate's probably going to drop a bit based on its economic optimum rate. But I'd be really careful about cutting it too much because if you look at the shape of those nitrogen response curves, you're going to get into a dangerous zone there pretty quickly, I think, if you cut back too much on nitrogen, keeping in mind that economic optimum rate is probably going to drop a little bit from years of much better price conditions.
It kind of goes back to that probability that we've already been talking about with, calibration curves for phosphorus and potassium. I mean, you have the same thing for corn nitrogen, right? And so the idea of what's economic, what's agronomic. And so, yeah, I mean, you can, that slope is pretty slippery, right? And then you can also bring in different source and products and availability, right, Dan?
Yeah, that's a, important piece of the economics, right, is looking at the sources of nitrogen. The anhydrous might be a lot cheaper in areas, or urea, but a lot of folks are moving to where they can store it on their farm, getting better prices and locking in prices. So using those as an economic piece is really important from the nitrogen standpoint, because it for corn, that's outside of seed, that's your biggest variable cost. So it's a big deal as well. I did want to echo back the original question on some of the nutrients. I would echo there's some nutrients on those soil tests that there's a I would say there's some value, but maybe not much value.
You get a lot of numbers, and they look they're single digits. Surely they're low, Dan, right?
Look at like something like sulfur, right? Or on nitrogen soil testing, how variable and challenging that is. Even something boron or some of these micro.
I'd say like boron, copper, zinc. I mean, that's one's like, oh, it looks so low. It's like it's a soil test value, and so we have to kind of caution a little bit on those.
And some of those, like, they just don't. We just don't have the responsiveness in a lot of areas to build those curves over time, and a lot of the work has been done in that P and K realm and pH. A lot of those, there's not a lot of data or calibration behind them. Just your thoughts on that, Megan. Just being mindful of some of those nutrients.
Absolutely.
Just because they say they're low doesn't mean.
Yeah. So I think this goes back to the idea of trying to stick to things that are reliably going to give you a return on your investment. And we don't have enough data or enough proof to really show that those micros, and again looking at some of those more specialty products, if we want to throw micronutrients in there, are going to necessarily pay you back and pay you back consistently or enough that it's going to pay for the product and more. So I definitely exercise caution, even if it looks low, even if product is attempting to be sold to you, might not be the year for it. And it's something we can definitely look into. I'm still building my research program, so micros is something that we can build in. But I'd exercise caution there for sure. I'd focus on nitrogen in corn and make sure your P and K is where it needs to be, and maybe kind of hang back on some of the other nutrients in a year like this.
So we have talked many a time on this show about,
I'm waiting for it. I know what he's going to say.
Biologicals.
I knew it was coming.
And I guess, how does that change your research? How does it change what it is you want to do? Because what these biologicals are trying to do is change what's happening in the soil, just kind of at the flip of a switch or at the drop of a biological. How does that change what you do? Yeah,
so I think it's something that, they're around now, and they're going to continue to be around, and lots of different types and options and shapes and sizes. So I think it's something that's going to, have to be a component of what I'm looking into in one way or another. I think the kind of key challenge with the biological products is that there's so many of them, and some of them work, probably, but do they work consistently? Can I predict when they'll work? Do I know when to buy that product, when it's going to pay me back? Not really, in most of the cases of these products. So yes, I envision having some sort of biological product testing component, trying to figure out which ones maybe work sort of reliably. Can we predict the growing season conditions or stress conditions under which they're going to, help with crop nutrition? But that's a tricky space with so many products to try and test.
And it's based on so many factors, including geography, right? I mean, it's that's got to play into this in a big way too. I know, Shaun, you've looked into some of this, and Dan, you too. But geography plays a big role. Soil type. I mean, all of these different things play into that.
And then you think about the inherent biology that's already there, the microbial population that's already there, and bringing something out. Say, I'm going to add this little teaspoon essentially to a dumpster truck full of the same biology, right? So, you think about that change. you've got to look at consistency, soil type, all of those things come to play.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think if you're trying to evaluate, if you're looking into some of these products and they sound really good, and they're showing responsiveness of some sort in their sales packet, ask questions about where that data comes from, and was it done in a greenhouse, for example? Because whatever happened in the greenhouse probably not going to happen in your field. So ask the hard questions to get a little more about where that data comes from.
Yeah.
I want to get back one more thing. So foundational things are what you're talking about, right? Get your pH, your lime, get your P and K. Those are foundational things. Nitrogen is certainly foundational on the corn side, and timing, and then you do the market price through the winter, or if you can set it now, if it's good enough. I haven't looked at the prices. Sulfur and soybeans. Certainly, there's fields that are very responsive. There's fields that aren't. I'll go and say those that you already know are responsive. I personally would not cut that one out, but those that are on the edge of, hey, I don't know. I mean, I've been doing this for a number of years on the sulfur and soybeans, and if they still haven't tested, it's like, okay, you could probably tap the brakes a little bit, or at least have that recommendation, that research on your farm of strip or two, and not go the whole farm into it, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
What else do we need to discuss here? We've got harvest like right around the corner.
Dan's going to go his combine ready as soon as we get down here.
Are you really?
Pulling her out of the shed.
There we go.
Yeah.
Let's see what sabotages were. I mean, what mice have taken them over.
It's always amazing the gremlins over the winter, what they do, and in the shadows. So.
And by gremlins, you mean Shaun and his team.
Yes, exactly.
We do have some things that have kind of come up here. We've talked a little bit about disease, Shaun, and these very dry conditions. What has that led to here for soybeans?
Yeah, I think we want to go back to the last few weeks. You've talked about what I call the state fair disease, right? Sudden death syndrome. But we've got two other diseases that show that exact same physiology in terms of the symptomology, right? The intervenochlorosis. And the new one over the last couple of years has been red crown rot. Darcy's been seeing more and more samples come through, lighten up the counties. I'm counting 7, 8, 9 counties now within Indiana. There's a whole slew of them in Illinois. So if you do see, at this point, still see those intervenochlorosis, take samples, send them in to see what we've got, because it can be sudden death syndrome, could be brown stem rot, or red crown rot. And a couple weeks ago, Darcy showed me a field that was J. Randolph, thereabouts. Can't remember which county right now. The whole field was taken out with red crown rot. And so we need to be mindful of what we're up against. So drying conditions, I guess to finish that out is, normally SDS shows up during state fair time, right, this seed fill period, because we have so much photosynthesis moving through the pipeline of the plant that we have some toxins. And if we dry out the toxins from SDS, that's when we start to see the symptomology. And so we're seeing the same thing with these other two soil-borne diseases of red crown rot and brown stem rot.
And Dan, we've touched on southern rust. Anything else out there that we're seeing any big movement on?
That's a big one. I think when you bring in the equation of foliar diseases and also dry conditions, you got to be mindful of harvestability in the crop. Start paying attention to the stalk quality, the lower portions of the stalk. We've seen. I also want to echo this year. I've had so many calls and pictures sent to me on just weird oddities that have, from the tassel wrapping to I had stuff on, short husks in corn, which can happen. A lot of that's environmental stressors. We've had some arrested ear syndrome show up this year in areas, just a lot of oddities out there. But taking the time, we always stress this, taking the time to one, look at the stalk quality and maybe prioritize some of those fields that, hey, we need to harvest this one sooner than others.
So is this when you say it's okay for me to push corn down now? You used to talk about stalks.
So
I like this time I can do it without getting in trouble.
Shaun always likes this measurement.
Yeah, okay. Shaun puts his football gear back on, from high school, and he
starts 42.
Yeah. Which just so happened to be where we were parked during the Farm Progress show. It was kind of funny. We failed to look around to see exactly where we parked, but we heard a kid go blue 42, and we're like, oh, okay, perfect. So that was helpful. Thank you, kid. But yeah, I mean, we're there. I was driving just north of us here in White County, and I don't know. It was like one side of the road. It was green corn still kind of moving, and then the other side's like, all right, let's get this harvested now. Like it's there ready to rock and roll.
Yeah. And so being mindful, that's a big thing with corn is, corn it does everything in its power to fill that ear, and if it has to cannibalize itself, it will, and it'll target the lower portion of the stalk. It'll in some cases target the ear shank as well. But those are the areas that, we want to get out of the field so we don't have a storm roll through and we're trying to pick it off the ground. But also be mindful, I think we're in pretty good shape just with the dry conditions on the ear rot side, but be mindful of that as you move forward. And, this time of year, I always stress it's a great time to learn. It's a great time to learn what worked, what didn't, what hybrids worked well, which ones didn't, which hybrids got smoked with southern rust and which ones are fine. And you think about moving into a tight year, it's, understand, look at the books, look at, why we always stress having strips, check strip in your fields or strips in your field to, hey, we need to cut back some things. Okay, let's take a look on the yield monitors and stuff and look at what worked and what didn't. Calibrate your yield monitors too, as well, because they can tell you a whole lot of nothing if they're not calibrated correctly.
Trash in, trash out. Right?
Exactly. So just be mindful of that stuff and learn. But big thing is just those areas that have been stressed, the drought stress and the foliar disease stress. I get really concerned about some of the stalk quality in some of those areas, stalk rots, stuff like that moving in, and harvestability.
And that's why your corn is trying to look more like Shaun soybeans.
Yes,
that short corn.
We're going to be seeding them at the same rate, same row spacing. So we don't need precision standards anymore.
We actually have there's a faculty member in biochemistry out here that is a corn breeder, and he had me walk some of his. You want to see some crazy stuff? Go. He actually had corn plants that I think was about the same height as Shaun soybeans out there. So maybe they're 20 years from now we might have corn and soybeans the same height.
We'll take a field trip here after this. Shaun, you're diligently writing notes.
I am. So then I can come back on Dan. Is really the reason, so I don't forget things. No.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. Get through your notes here.
No. I'm as Dan's talking about stock strength and integrity. And I think about commodity prices, and I'm like, one major area on the corn side, because unfortunately the market on soybean isn't as wide on grain moisture, right? And we think about if we're bringing in 14.5%, 15% grain moisture on soybeans, like, you're going to get docked and everything else. And, we've got like 1 percentage point, and then everything else is, you can bring in 9, 10%, but we've lost 3% water weight and three bushels per acre. Whereas corn, bring in 28% and bring it down to 15.5 or whatever. But I think drying costs is another area where we can save a lot of money. So this is going to be this kind of hedging, understanding your cornfields. Like, I want to let that thing, it's September 3rd, 4th, right? And so we got plenty of time for field dry down. We don't have to pay gas for that. Yeah. So make sure that you understand, do I have a field that has stock integrity issues? If I don't, let Mother Nature just dry that sucker down.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a kind of a tough game to play, but that's also the importance of getting out in those fields and taking a look at them. We have a big undertaking this year that we're really looking at harvest timing in corn, so we're hoping to actually get after some of those questions and look at drying costs and stuff like that. But the longer that corn plant sits out in the field, it can lose some of that stalk integrity. It can also, drier grain can hit the header and cause differences in harvest losses and stuff like that. But also on the flip side of that is the propane costs and trying to balance that. So identifying fields that maybe need to be prioritized. Maybe there's some fields that are fine, and those can probably sit a little bit, and making sure you adjust your combine settings and stuff like that as you get into those drier fields. But yeah, that's a really important point, especially in years when we have, tight economic times. I know last year a lot of farmers never dried, and they didn't have to turn the dryers on once. So that could happen this year if the dry conditions persist. But if we do run into an area, there's a lot of late planted corn in areas of the state that we run into a little bit more wetter conditions. We could could run into some of those challenges.
Yeah, but Dan, you ought to know me by now. That totally sets you up for that, right? Because I'm going to wait for it to dry down, but I mean, what about this phantom yield loss?
Oh boy, here we go. Yeah.
But I mean, so that's something a lot of people talk about too, right? The idea of like, hey, if I let it stay in the field, aren't I losing some? But you're looking at that, right?
We're looking. That's a question I get asked a lot. It's something that I actually blame Bob a little bit for this for his research back in the 90s, where he found it was every 1% moisture was about 1% grain yield loss. But I know he's tried it again. He hasn't seen it. Mark Licht out in Iowa did a lot of work on this. Was unable to see it. Basically, the idea is that the longer the kernel sits on the ear in the field, that we have some level of respiration, and losing some of the weight on those kernels.
Is that like the corn sweating so much that it's losing weight?
Yes.
Is it? It's in a sauna, literally.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think the majority of the yield losses that people think, and I do think there's cases they're seeing it, is predominantly harvest losses.
Yeah, that's what I assume too.
It's
shatter
at the header.
Yeah.
It's coming out of the back of the machine. A lot of the recent research that has been done is really documented that it's truly due to harvest losses. Yep. But we're looking at it very intensively this year. One of my grad students, we're also looking at it on the mycotoxin side with Darcy. So we'll see. But all indications are that it. Can it happen? Sure. It tends to be very minor on the respiration side, and then there's a lot of areas that they never see it too. So I think its majority is the harvest losses occurring.
All I'm hearing is just another reason to hate corn sweat, and blame
another reason to hate corn. What?
Blame it for all of our problems. Shaun.
Yeah, you see my list here, don't you?
I do. I see your list. It's time to go through it now. What do we have here as we get close to soybean harvest too?
No, it's the same thing. Just to be timely with the harvest, there's going to be these environmental conditions that are going to cause beans to senesce and drop leaves. But at the same point, if they've built this factory, right, all these leaves and everything to harvest sunlight, and then all of a sudden they turn dry. And so we lose out on pods, we lose out on some of those leaves. We're going to get in the case where we're going to have green stems, right? And so a lot of people, again, you have your own issues with harvest. I have our own issues with this, that, green stems, those beans aren't dry yet. And so we do need to be mindful of, just because we have green stems doesn't mean that the grain isn't ready. So same kind of thing. Go out, check, make sure that you're there with grain moisture. You might have to chew through at a slower speed, 3-4 mile an hour instead of 5 if you're really pushing with a draper head or something.
Yeah. And I was going to just add on to your point, too, that there is a lot more flexibility in corn harvest than there is in soybean harvest. I think there's a little bit more of a time aspect and more of a issues with harvest on the soybean front than corn.
Are you suggesting that soybeans are they're a bit of a diva?
They're a little more
this
of a
is the only time. We do it every year. I hit corn as a diva, but yeah.
Harvest diva. They're a little more of a harvest
actually,
diva.
the market is. Soybeans are not. The market is. If we had the same, you do the percent swing that you go for corn harvest, and if we had the same, if I could do one thing, and I would just set a bushel of soybeans at 10% moisture, that alone, I think, could open up a world of harvestability, right? We're set at 13%, and how much are we pulling in at 10%, 11%, and we're losing water weight every year. Yeah. If we just had go from a 14% down to 10%, that just a measly 4%, right, of moisture points, I think we could have tremendous amount of yield potential. But we don't, and they're never going to change it.
Harvest diva.
The other part that I'll put out there, we've done a little bit of work on desiccation of soybeans. It's not widespread here in the Midwest, but we have got some work on that. I've just got a call on that yesterday. More of a mid-south, southeast thing about, hey, we got a hurricane coming in, and we could see it coming, so we need to make sure we can desiccate this crop, get it out before that hurricane comes in. We don't typically have that, but there are questions here. It's like, maybe we can catch old market price. Maybe we can stretch out harvesting soybeans. And so we did some work last year on that, and timing is huge, right? If we go out at R6.5, so the beans fill in the pod completely, we're starting to separate that bean and the membrane of the pod, so you have to break those open. That's R6.5. We still have about 5 to 7% yield potential there. And so if we go that early, we lose out 5-7.5% yield. If we wait till R7, so it's starting to have some pods are losing their greenness and yellow to brown. Leaves are starting to drop. We can definitely desiccate, gain 7 to 10 days on a harvest schedule with no yield loss. So just that information, is there if you want it. There's some products out there for it if someone wants to get out earlier with cover crops as an example, so they can set up for some of these clovers that maybe are legumes that need a little bit more setup time for that corn crop. That could be another play.
Do we have any other questions for Megan? I mean, Dan, I don't know that you've gotten much revenge here. Do you have any additional questions?
He wants her to stay. So.
Okay. I get that. I get that.
It took a while for us to get Megan. I want her to stay here.
All right. Well, Megan, final thoughts here as we wrap up the Purdue Crop Chat. Some things that folks should take away from today's talk.
Yeah, I think, going into this fall and trying to make fertility decisions, like we talked about, just try and stick to what you know is reliably going to give you that return. Look at cutting back on your P and K if you can, depending on your soil test levels. If you're not soil testing routinely, think about, starting that soon, hopefully, because it can really help inform your decisions and save you dollars at the end of the day in terms of your fertility and fertilizer management. So I think that's my wrap up.
Okay. Well, that wraps up this edition of the Purdue Crop Chat. Another good one, guys. Could be our best yet.
Could be.
We'll have to let someone else decide that, though. I don't know. It's
award-winning, right?
Award-winning, yes. Yeah. We did win an award.
We did.
I mean, I'll be honest. I wish that it was a, radio podcast award, because that's my industry.
International
it was
award.
An international extension award.
Yes.
So I've been honored more by the extension system than by my profession, but that's okay. I'll take it.
So ultimately what you're saying is that we don't know you as well, and so they're like, yeah, we'll give him a pass.
My reputation has not preceded me in the extension arena quite yet. Guys, thank you again for doing this. Megan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Are you going to come back?
Yeah, probably. We'll have to get that nickname ironed out, but...
Oh, I can just combine them all. Maple syrup, Megan Bourns. I mean, that's...
As long as you didn't add manure into that, because that would be a very unique kind of taste testing event.
Maple syrup manure?
No. Maybe that's just the biological, that you're providing some sugars for the biological, so the maple syrup and manure.
Yeah. We'll do this again soon. If you listen to today's podcast, thank you for doing so. If you'd like to see how funny we look while doing the podcast, check out the video. It's on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Again, thank you for joining us. We'll do the Purdue Crop Chat again here soon. This has been Hoosier Ag Today, Indiana's Farm Network.
This has been Purdue Crop Chat, a regular series featuring Purdue Extension's Dr. Dan Quinn and Dr. Shaun Casteel, made possible by the Indiana Corn and Soybean Checkoffs, the Indiana Corn Marketing Council, and the Indiana Soybean Alliance. The Checkoffs are pleased to help bring you agronomy insights from Purdue Extension. Opinions on the podcast are those of the host and guests and not those of the sponsor. Purdue Crop Chat is a service of Purdue University Extension and Hoosier Ag Today. Timely, relevant, credible.